Hi, everyone. Welcome to this morning's virtual event with Tara Brach. My name is Carell Centers, and I'm the events director here at Bookshop Santa Cruz, where I'm broadcasting live. And here at Bookshop Santa Cruz, things are starting to return back to normal. We have our doors open again, our hours are going to expand, our bathrooms are open, and you can even go without a mask in the store if you are vaccinated. But as we continue to go back to pre-pandemic, the way of the pre-pandemic world, we do want to remember that there are still so many things happening in the world right now. We have rapid climate deterioration, the essential work of dismantling the lie of white supremacy, and ongoing economic and political upheaval. So we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend time with us as we dive into, ways of continuing to really be human and to tune into what matters the most. So thank you for being here. Today, we're thrilled to welcome one of our favorites, Tara Brach. We're so thrilled to welcome her virtually to Santa Cruz. We've wanted to host her for many years, so we're so thrilled that she's here. And our event is co-sponsored by Insight Santa Cruz, whose mission is to support anyone interested in the path of awakening and liberation through mindfulness and loving kindness. And Insight is also offering so many great classes, including some in-person sits again. So definitely check out their website, which I will pop in the chat. So today we will hear a conversation, a presentation from Tara, and then we'll move to some audience questions at towards the end of the evening. So, or at the end of I'm used to evening events, at the end of our time together today. We are going to be inviting folks who ask questions up to the screen for today's talk. So if you enter your question into the Ask a Question tab, which is at the bottom of the screen, that's where you'll submit your audience questions. And just keep an eye out if we select your question that we may invite you to the screen. You don't have to appear, but if you do want to, you can just go ahead and accept that invitation to join the live conversation on screen. And we will love to engage with you. Tara would love to engage with you for your question tonight. Other things to know, you will see on the right side of your screen the chat field. That is where people are chiming in, whether they're tuning in from. Thank you so much for doing so. If you find that distracting, you can hide that field by hovering around it, and then you'll see a little arrow at the top right. Just click that to collapse it if you don't want to see the chat. This event is being recorded so that you can watch it afterwards. That recording will be limited in availability to those of you who have registered. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out a password after the event has concluded, and you can access the event through that password. So all registered folks will be able to rewatch the event. I do definitely encourage you to buy the book. A lot of you have picked up your copies of Finding the Gold. Your purchase supports local jobs and independent culture, and it shows the publisher that our audience is invested and engaged. So I really can't overstate the importance of supporting us with a purchase. And if you already have Finding the Gold, Tara Brach has three other wonderful books that you can purchase as well. So thank you so much in advance for your support. You can check back on Bookshop's Crowdcast page and website for more upcoming events. We hope you come back for more. But now on to the main attraction. Tara Brach has been practicing and teaching meditation since 1975, as well as leading workshops and meditation retreats at centers throughout North America and Europe. She has a PhD in clinical psychology, is the founder of the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, and is the author of Radical Acceptance, True Refuge, and Radical Compassion. Tara's weekly podcasts of talks and meditations are downloaded more than 3 million times each month. And I know many of her regular viewers are here with us today, so welcome. And I'm so thrilled to finally be welcoming Tara to Santa Cruz virtually. Welcome to our screen. I will be down in the corner, and I will join you again at around 1:45 for our Q&A. Thank you so much for being here, Tara.
Oh, thanks so much, Carell, and welcome, friends. I'm so glad you chose to be part of this, and I'm really excited to be doing an event with Bookshop Santa Cruz. It's a place I love. I look forward to coming in the door next time. So I'm on the East Coast right now. I'm on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, where our internet's totally wonky. So if I freeze up, just let it be an invitation for the sacred pause, just pause with me, and it'll resume after a bit. Yeah, so we'll be exploring the themes that I find most alive around trusting the gold. And I'll be including some practices, so we'll have a chance to practice. And then, as Carell mentioned, there'll be time for questions. And as a beginning kind of reflection, you might listen to the words of mystic and theologian Thomas Merton, who says, "Life is this simple. We're living in a world that's absolutely transparent, and the divine is shining through it all the time. This is not just a nice story or fable, it is true." So just to pause here and imagine, what would your life be like if you could move through the world and sense in yourself and all those you encountered that sacredness, in the trees and other animals, plants, all the beings, the same sentience and aliveness and heart space, love that's right here. What if we could namaste, that expression of really bow and honor the light in each other? What would it be like? As we consider that, I'll say that the word namaste is really kind of at the center of the book, Trusting the Gold. That sense of, I see the sacredness, I see the light in you and all beings, the value of all beings. And there's also a cartoon I saw not so long ago that says, the light in me acknowledges the shadow in you. So that's part of what we'll explore, which is the challenges to seeing goodness, seeing the gold. And just to share with you, I hadn't intended to write another book, because Radical Compassion, which is a guidebook to RAIN, just came out last year, but my beloved staff had been collecting quotes and anecdotes, and as they came together, we saw the theme so clearly as being, can we see the intrinsic value in all beings, and how utterly compelling that theme is right now. I mean, Carell named the challenges of our planet, that we're not seeing the sacredness in our larger body, the earth, and the horrors and violence of racism and all the other caste systems that keep us othering. It's the most polarized time most of us has experienced. We really need to learn to see goodness and to reconnect. So, and I'll say personally that the title, Trust the Gold, has become kind of a mantra for me, so that whenever I'm in some way disconnected or stuck or anxious or down on myself, I'll often just say, trust the gold, to myself. And it just reminds me of, underneath all the waves, this kind of the purity of heart that's here. It helps me trust myself and others. So I invite you to explore that if that's appealing. And the words, trusting the gold, the story that really kind of gave rise to it, many of you know, because I know you're with me a lot, at least some of you on the podcast, but just to bring it right here, because it's got a certain kind of power, is the story of the Buddha statue, that clay statue in Thailand that people loved over the centuries just because it was, large and popular and people were dedicated to it. It wasn't beautiful in any way. But in the 50s, in the 1950s, there was a big drought and cracks appeared. And what the monks discovered as they looked into the cracks was the shine of gold, that it really turned out to be the largest solid gold statue of the Buddha in Southeast Asia. And the monks believed that it was covered with plaster and clay so that it could survive through difficult times, through attacking armies that might have destroyed or stolen it. And they describe it like this. They say, this is the same way that we cover over our innate purity, so we get through difficult times in a world where there's often not unconditional love or understanding, but rather abuse and mistreatment, and a society that is violent and addicted. So we protect ourselves with our coverings. And the suffering is, and this is the key point here, the suffering is we get identified with the coverings, with our egos, the defendedness and the ways we try to show ourselves as, expand ourselves or in some way prove that we're good. We get identified with the ego and we forget the gold. That's the suffering. That's the Buddha described that as our core suffering. We forget who we are. And of course, if I'm identified with my coverings, and when I look at you, I'm going to mostly be looking at your coverings. So it becomes a really powerful process to look beyond the coverings, except for here's the thing, is that suffering wouldn't be suffering if it weren't a really strong conditioning to get identified in a small way and to experience ourselves or each other as something's wrong. One of my favorite understandings is that in contrast to the Golden Buddha story, we have our creation story of the West that basically says you're basically flawed and you're getting kicked out of the garden. And that kind of bleeds into so much of our psyches. There's a story I heard a long time ago. A new monk comes to the monastery and he's assigned to help the monks that are there copy the old canons of the church by hand. But he realizes they're copying from copies. And that if there was a mistake in one copy, it would just keep going through time, through the years. So he brings us up to the abbot, and the abbot says, well, you make a good point. We've been copying from copies for years and years and years. And he says, I'll go down and look at the original manuscript that's in the vault in the cellar of the dark caves underneath the monastery. And so he goes down there to look, but he's gone for hours. Nobody sees him. Eventually, the young monk gets worried and goes down to see what's going on. And he finds the abbot banging his head against the wall and crying uncontrollably. So he says, Father, Father, what's wrong? And in a choking voice, the old abbot replies, the word was celebrate. I love that one. So this is what I've described as the trance of unworthy, where we assume that we're flawed and we look for the flaws in each other. And it gets in the way of intimacy with ourselves and other people, and it gets in the way with feeling creative because we're always afraid of making a mistake and really enjoying our moments. So if you've been with me or read my books, you know that I've been pretty open about my own journey with the trance of unworthiness, that harsh inner critic where I think early 20s was just so at war with myself, with my body and with my personality, and not thinking I was showing up for friends and I wasn't working hard enough, or, it was just a chronic not enough. And writing Radical Acceptance was the first book I wrote was really basically saying we have to see the trance to wake up from it. And I remember going and doing a real book tour, not a virtual book tour, in the sense of, going to Boulder, Colorado, and they had a big poster announcing my workshop on radical acceptance. It had a big picture of me, and the caption underneath the picture said, something is wrong with me. Because that was, we were kind of keeping on focusing on how we think something's wrong with us. Okay, so fast forward, it's been decades, 5 decades, that I've been kind of tracking my own relationship with myself. And what I can say is, and I see this in myself and other long-time practitioners, people on the path, this is the bad news part, is the conditioning to think something's wrong with us, that we're not enough, really is persistent. I can still find the judgments and the thoughts and the feelings coming up. But the good news is there's much less lag time. It's like, oh, there's that again. Not believing it, coming back to a larger truth of who I am. And so this is pretty much what I want to be exploring with you, that it's truly possible to make a shift from believing a limiting story about ourselves and buying into our judgments that make others bad and create distance, to really trusting the basic goodness. And it's really a shift to freedom. It's to true happiness, and it's possible. And even more, the more you dedicate to seeing and trusting the goodness in you, the more you can help others wake up to it in them. We kind of call it out in each other. It's like the poet Tukaram, he writes this. He says, "I could not lie anymore, so I called my dog God. First he looked confused, then he started smiling. Then he even danced. I kept at it, now he doesn't even bite. I'm wondering if this might work on people." And it does. When we see the light in others, it does call it out. So the big question then is, what gets in the way? What stops us? And what we find is that daily our survival brain is alive and well, which means we have a deep habit of feeling separate from others, kind of I'm in this bubble and you're out there kind of sense. And with a sense of separation comes fear, comes vigilance, fight, flight, freeze. We're protecting our existence. And fight, flight, freeze actually blocks us from that whole integrated heart-mind experience that can see the gold. Now, you might be wondering, yeah, but don't we need our survival brain? Don't we need to get activated? Don't we need to protect ourselves? And the answer is completely yes. If we didn't have fear, we'd be brain dead. So trusting the goal doesn't mean we look away from how we might be creating harm, how we might be harming ourselves. Doesn't mean that we look away from how others are causing harm, that we drop our defenses. We can't trust that our egos will act in a benevolent way, or even in a wise way. We can't trust we'll stick with the exercise routine, or that we won't lose our temper, or we won't wound, or others won't wound or kill us. We can't trust any of that. So what we're trusting is not the coverings. We might think it was the clay plaster that's trying to, the ego coverings. What we're trusting is the potential that's in each of us and manifesting through us for love, for awareness, that's our innate capacity. And I often go to Joan Halifax, Roshi Joan Halifax has a wonderful phrase that we're cultivating a strong back and a soft front. And this has everything to do with mature, wise trust. That a strong back lets us have a wise discrimination and see clearly, oh, I can't trust that. I can't trust that person will take my confidence and not hurt me with it. So we have a strong back. We know how to boundary and we know how to behave. But our soft front can still see past that to the goodness in that person and the goodness in us. So we don't forget that. Now, the more that any of us have been wounded, the harder it is to keep in mind the goodness. And that's because we get hijacked by our limbic system. It takes over. The more wounding. If we've been traumatized, when it comes up again, even if there's not a reason in the current life for the trauma to come up, because it's completely wired into our system, when it comes up, we go into distrust. Trauma and distrust go together. So it takes more work to bring healing presence to the trauma and to begin to see past the filter that trauma has, which is this world's a dangerous place. The more we've been wounded by our society, the more natural that distrust is. And we, as I mentioned earlier, we're in a society that's structured with dominance hierarchies. And by that I mean racial caste system. It's just it's so there that if you are Black Indigenous, person of color, you've been getting messages that are injurious throughout your life. And those messages and the actual violence to the body creates trauma, creates distrust. So there's a lot in our society and in our experience with caregivers that leave us very identified, and it's difficult to reopen. And yet we can. And this is true for all of us. We need to be patient. We need to be really compassionate about the pace. We wake up at the pace of trust. Just really compassionate, because if we think we should be more loving and more trusting, if we think we should be more forgiving, that actually makes us more identified with the covering. That judgment actually keeps us trapped. So the ground of this is compassion. So again, here we are, friends. These times are so polarized, and we've never so desperately needed pathways to building trust. We've never needed it so much. I just watched a documentary last night about Van Jones, who many of you know, CNN commentator, African-American activist, progressive. And the work he did building bridges to get the first step, the legislation that helps to deal with prison reform, and all the bridge building that it took, and how hard it was, because on both sides he was distrusted. He was distrusted by the progressives for befriending and trying to make connections with conservatives. He was mistrusted by conservatives for being too progressive. It's really difficult. And yet, if each of us stretched and tried to lean in the direction of trusting the gold, we'd be bringing amazing healing to our world. I've been struck by Einstein's words. He says, I think the most important question facing humanity is the universe a friendly place? This is the first and most basic question all people must answer for themselves. And I think when he says friendly place, he's talking about a fundamental benevolence or goodness in life, that we may be way more complex than a plant in certain ways, but our love for being alive, our love for truth, our wanting to manifest who we are fully is in the most simplest life forms also there, that there's some basic goodness. I remember talking about this one time. My mom was there. This is when she was alive, about 8 years ago, and she graduated from Barnard as a philosophy major, and she loved to take issue with me. So we were driving home, and she said to me, "Well, what makes goodness more basic than badness? I mean, is there basic goodness in racism and in capital punishment, or the way humans are destroying this earth?" And that was her argument, and I agreed with her that there's no conceptual proof that the gold is really fundamental and the coverings are coverings. So it's more you bringing your presence to explore. It's like the Buddha said, ehipassego, come see for yourself. Because what I found is when I get quiet, when the waves quiet down some, there is a presence and a love that feels like home. And I know that I come from this earth, belong to this earth, I'm stardust, we all are. So it has to be in everyone, this loving awareness. It may be covered over by the cloud, the sun gets covered by the clouds, it may be covered over, but it's there. And here's the thing I told her, that even when I feel disconnected from my own goodness, if I assume it's there, if I live as if loving awareness is our deepest essence, it wakes me up. It brings me home again. So, and I can share with you, for all her sparring, she, especially during her final years, she lived in that spirit of trust and goodness and of gratitude, and it gave her a good measure of peace. Okay, so we're going to turn to practice now. And two pathways to trusting the gold if you want to deepen your attention to this. And the first pathway is to bring complete compassion and presence to where there's mistrust, to whatever's right here. And that compassion and presence will unfold the gold, will reveal it. So that's the first pathway. And the second is to look directly for the gold. And we're going to do a very short practice in each. And if the practices appeal, then I invite you to return to them, or else you'll feel like you just got the slightest taste. So the first, coming into presence with what's right here and revealing the gold that way, I often teach it with the acronym RAIN: recognize, allow, investigate, nurture. Because this is a weave of mindfulness and compassion that when we get thrown off, when we're caught in the coverings, when we're really small, just knowing those 4 steps can help us come home. So recognize, just see, okay, this is what's going on. Like an example for me, because I've had many rounds of practicing RAIN when I'm feeling small. There was, for many years, I was struggling with illness. At some point, really not even knowing if I could ever get well again. I'm much better now. But I remember one particular time, it was kind of a turning point in terms of my emotional, spiritual relationship with it, where it had been a lot of chronic pain and fatigue and a loss of mobility. And I started getting really depressed, irritated, anxious. So I decided to do RAIN with it, and I recognized that I was, just really grim and tight and just fearful. And then I did the A of RAIN, which is allow, where with allow, you just kind of say, this belongs. These are the waves of the moment. Let them be here. Don't judge them or ignore them. And then I did the I of RAIN, and I asked myself, I's investigate. So what am I believing right now? And what I found was that I was believing that there was something wrong with me for being sick, that it was my fault, but even more for the way I was handling being sick, that I didn't like my aversive, uptight self. So there was shame. And then part of the I of investigate, the most important part, is just to feel that. So I actually opened to those feelings of shame in my heart and my gut, that squeeze and fear that came with it. And that was what I sometimes call the ouch moment, where I could really sense how many times in my life, so many times, that it wasn't just the pain of what was going on, but I was making myself wrong. And I could see that. I could see all just the shape of a lifetime, and I had that kind of soul sadness that, wow, that's a lot of judgment to be adding on. And that set me up for the N, or nurturing, of RAIN, which was, it made it possible for me to bring in compassion and in some way say, it's okay. It's okay, sweetheart. Trust your goodness. And then what happened was, and this is called after the RAIN, it's a critical part of the practice that many people forget, is just resting in the presence that's there and noticing what shifted. Because after being present and compassionate, what was there was really a space of tenderness. And I realized I had shifted from this bad, sick self to this space of tenderness. It was the gold, this loving awareness. And the thing that feels important about this, friends, and this is something if anything, I want to teach about more, is that the more you get familiar with the gold, like every time you do have moments of quietness, or where you sense your heart open, or you sense a tenderness or space, to really get familiar with it. Because the way our brains change, the way neural pathways get altered, is when you really immerse yourself in that positive, more awake state. And then you notice that this feels more like the truth of who I am than any of those stories. So I found that RAIN really dissolves the opaqueness of the coverings. It lets the gold shine through, and we get more and more trusting that. Okay, let's just do a brief practice together, okay? If you need to move a little bit, please move, and we'll just do a very brief practice of rain. Take a moment to find yourself a way of sitting that feels upright and at ease. Let your attention go inward. Just feel the movement of the breath. Bring yourself right here. And if you scan your life, you might sense if there's something you'd like to bring rain to, something that maybe brings up self-judgment or self-doubt, fear, anger. And let the situation that provokes it, that triggers it, be right here. You begin with the R of rain, just to name what you're aware of, whatever's predominant. Maybe it's fear, anxiety, judgment, irritation. And you might name it with a mental whisper or an out loud whisper, because the beginning, just by naming it, you begin to have more presence. It begins the first step of having the covering be less opaque, less sticky. So just to name what you're noticing and allowing it just for now, if you can, just letting it be here. So there's a courage to allowing, and there's a gentleness and a curiosity that you can then bring to the eye of rain, investigate. And you might ask yourself, as I did, what are you believing? What am I believing when this is going on? Maybe there's a belief that you're failing in some way, that you're not worthy, that you're not lovable. Or maybe that you can't trust someone else, that you'll never succeed. Whatever the belief, what's most important is to sense how that lives in your body. When you're stuck, when you're caught, where do you feel it? Is it the throat, the chest, the belly? And if you want, you can let your whole posture express the painful state. It'll help you get in touch with it. Maybe your shoulders want to hunch over, maybe there's a scowl, or your jaw's clenched. Maybe your hands are in fists. Go right to then in your body where you feel most vulnerability. Come directly in contact with that. And you might put your hand on your heart to deepen that sense of you're in relationship with that vulnerable place. And this begins the nurturing in a way. You might even sense that there's a witnessing part of you, an awake heart that's aware. And you might sense, what does that vulnerable place most need? What would the expression of compassion be right in this moment? And maybe there's just an energetic caring, that you're just caring about what's going on. Some warmth that can bathe the vulnerable place. Maybe there's some words. I'm sorry. I care about this suffering. I'm not leaving. I'm not abandoning you. I'm staying. Or it may be, thank you for trying to protect me to the fear, but I'm okay. Or maybe, as with me, it might be just trust the gold, trust the goodness. What's most important is a sense that you can let in care. And if it's hard to offer to yourself, imagine it coming through some other source, somebody that you know loves you, a friend, your dog, a spiritual teacher, a spiritual figure, the universe, just formless loving, washing through you. Just let it in. Rumi says, don't turn away. Keep your gaze on the wounded place. That's where the light enters you. Sensing the care that's holding the place of vulnerability. And becoming more aware now. This is after the rain of the presence that's here. Of perhaps what's shifted from that small self, that caught place, to a little more space, awareness, kindness. Sensing that this is more the truth of who you are than any story. And you might, if you like journaling, just ask yourself, who would I be if I trusted my basic goodness? What would my life be like? You can keep your attention inward if you'd like, because we're going to move into the second pathway of practice in a kind of seamless way, because we move from being with what's right here now to actually on purpose turning toward the gold, which you're already doing some. I'm going to read you Anthony DeMello. He says, it is a sobering thought that the finest act of love you can perform is not an act of service, but an act of seeing. When you serve people, you help, support, comfort, and alleviate pain. When you see them in their inner beauty and goodness, you transform and create. So friends, there's a real power to seeing the gold, seeing the goodness. It transforms our sense of who we are and who the other is. We have a real habit, as I mentioned before, what we call the negativity bias, of really fixating on what's wrong. And we have a confirmation bias that holds on to negative beliefs because we'd rather have certainty than be open to the possibility of the sacredness that's here. So we need to undo them and look directly at the goodness. And heart practices like loving kindness, that's what they do. They're based on seeing goodness and offering blessings. And similarly, the gratitude practices, remembering what we're grateful for, letting that fill us, turns us towards the gold. So as a second practice, you might just bring a smile to your lips and let your eyes soften so you feel your eyes are smiling. And take a moment to give yourself the gift of letting go through the body of anything you might be holding on to that's not necessary, that's not helpful. And do it physically, if not anything else. Just relaxing, maybe the shoulders, letting go. Softening your hands, loosening the belly. And bring to mind someone you love, ideally a relationship that's not complicated. And take some moments once you have them in mind to bring them close in and really sense what you most appreciate. You might see their eyes and see what they look like when they're lit up, when they're feeling happy, creative, alive. See what they look like when they're feeling love for you. And just be aware of their essence as good, as wakeful, as caring. You might mentally whisper their name or say it out loud and the words, thank you. And then again, saying their name and thank you. Sensing in some deep way that namaste, that you're seeing the sacred, the light in them. And feel your heart as you do that. Next, bring your attention to your own being now, to the care in your heart, to the warmth that's there. And take some moments to reflect on your own goodness, that there's this caring for another, and other qualities that come to mind. Your honesty, your deep aspiration to love well, your aspiration to know truth, to keep evolving and growing. Just sense the goodness. And again, as before, if it's difficult, you might again bring to mind someone who loves you. Look through their eyes. Sometimes we can bring to mind our future self, that expression of our being that's more awake, more living at home. And just look through the eyes of our future self at what's right here and see the goodness, see who you're becoming. You might offer a gesture of care, perhaps hand again on the heart. You just feel a sense like you could bow or say namaste to the light that's right here. And let that sense of the goodness, the light, the sacredness be as big as it is. Let it fill you. Let it fill your entire body and mind. Sensing why it's important, what's meaningful about it. It's like light coming in, water into a sponge. Track what's enjoyable and beautiful. Life is this simple. We are living in a world that is absolutely transparent, and the divine is shining through it all the time. This is not just a nice story or fable, it is true. Opening your attention now to others in your life and just see who comes to mind. Those you might know well, those not so well, and as you see them, sense the possibility of namaste, of beyond the personality, beyond the ego, just sensing the light, the sentience, the consciousness, the aliveness and love that lives through this being. You can continue to practice this and all the practices on your own. Taking a moment again to feel your breath, to be right here. Okay, if your eyes are closed, you might open them, and we're going to take some time now together for whatever questions are here. Corella will be bringing them to us, and I get to meet some of you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful practice. Really enjoyed that. So just a reminder to folks that we do have about 15 minutes for questions, which you can add to the Ask a Question tab at the bottom of your screen. I am going to see if Mel would like to join us on screen. Mel, no problem if not, but I will invite you and then I will go ahead and read your question. Okay, give me just one moment. Okay, so, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Are you hearing that? I think we're okay. I think it might be my sound. Let me know if it gets bad. So Mel has asked, Tara, in your work with individuals over the years, have there been core unwholesome thoughts or obstructions that are quite consistent, such as shame or unworthiness? Have you concluded that there are, for example, the big five? So maybe like five or so themes or things that are consistently obstructive.
And the name again, I missed it.
Their name is Mel.
Mel. Okay. So, and I won't be seeing Mel.
Not sure yet. I've invited Mel to the screen. See if you want to join us or not.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question because there seems to be some pervasive ones, some core beliefs that do run through most of us. And I think the core of the core is I'm not lovable, you know, not believing I'm lovable. Similar but a little different is I'm not worthy, and that could mean in some way I'm flawed and I'm not okay. Many people feel not seen, not understood, that the world won't see or understand me. Many people feel like they will never be happy, that it won't work out for them. So those are the ones that come to mind. That's, you know, they come from different directions. They all have the common denominator of not trusting our belonging. And, you know, Mother Teresa put it so powerfully that if we're suffering, it's because we have forgotten our belonging to one another. And whenever there's a sense that I don't belong, and most of us feel it in different situations, that comes with a sense of I can't trust others and I can't trust myself. So yeah, I hope that's helpful, Mel.
Thank you. Definitely can relate to having those ongoing feelings in myself, and I'm sure lots of the people here can as well. We have a question from Christy. Let me see. It's more of a asking you to repeat something that you said, but let me just see if Christy wants to join us. Okay. Thanks for bearing with all the clicking over here. So Christy has asked, Tara, could you please repeat the 2 pathways to trusting?
Yeah.
Christy?
Hi, Christy.
Uh-oh, can't quite hear you, Christy.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I got so many little sparks of resonance with what you said, and it was a powerful practice. And I'm wondering, what were the two you mentioned, the 2 paths, and I'm was then trying to write real quick and didn't get it done. So thank you again, and I appreciate what you do.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate you, Christy, asking me that because often the framework makes it easier to remember. The 2 paths, the first one is we start with presence with what is. So whatever's coming up, no matter what it is in our lives, you know, whether it's a feeling that we have just failed, a feeling of anger at another person for betrayal, whatever it is, we start where we are. And that's the pathway of bringing mindfulness and compassion to the present moment. And and the gift of mindfulness and compassion to the present moment is it unfolds and reveals the goal, the awareness and love that's intrinsic. But we have to go through the layers of being with the difficulty to get there. So that's path number 1, presence with what is. Path number 2 is intentionally looking to see the goodness, where we actually practice kind of going beyond our negativity bias and bringing people to mind, including ourselves, and actually scanning for the goodness. It's not in some way being a Pollyanna. It's not like we're forgetting the shadow side, but we're inclining ourselves to include the light. It's like Desmond Tutu said that, you know, that our task really is in the midst of the darkness to be able to remember the light. You know, so it's not delusional, it's more inclusive. So that's a second path, seeing the goodness.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the screen, Christy. It's so nice to see your face.
Good to see you.
All right. I actually had a question about, this is a little bit book specific, but I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about Vicky Alvarez and how you went about doing the illustrations for the book.
Thank you for asking, because every time I've talked about the book, I actually start with Vicky. Before Vicky came into it, it was a collection of quotes and anecdotes and stories. Vicky Alvarez is an amazing illustrator. She's a fantastic artist, and what she did was we selected certain teachings that she would be bringing alive visually, and she just did an awesome job. So it's kind of fun for me, because this is the first book that anybody I've seen, I've kind of wanted to hand a copy to, because I think it's so beautiful.
Really
And it feels good. It feels nice in the hands and so on. So I keep every time I have a chance, I give them away. Yeah. So thank you for asking, because I really love honoring her.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been looking through it since it hit our shelves last week, and been enjoying the drawings just almost as much as the words as well. So thank you. Okay, so inviting more questions. We have a couple of comments that perhaps we can have you respond to. We have one from Maureen, who says, soul sadness is almost a victorious insight or awareness, and rain is to help me connect and heal. I'm going to see if Maureen wants to say a little more about that, but maybe you could talk about that soul sadness.
Yeah. In the process of investigating and bringing mindfulness to what's going on inside us, there's a very crucial kind of transition point, and it comes when we get that we're suffering. Compassion arises in the moment that we really register suffering. And what we tend to do with ourselves is we're feeling the suffering, but we combine it with a sense of something's wrong with me for what I'm doing, or other people have it worse, or I should be able to figure my way out of this. But in the moments that drops away and there's just, ouch, this hurts, this is painful, a very spontaneous tenderness arises. And often that soul sadness is part of that tenderness, where rather than being identified with the bad person, we're more resting in a very kind witnessing place that's kind of like saying, oh, I'm so sorry, And I know for myself that whenever I kind of look at the landscape of my life and sense all the moments that I deprived myself of enjoying the sunset or another person's company, or just being playful because I was so involved with fixing what was wrong, I can sense that sadness. And I look at sadness as a kind of melting of the heart that's really, really healing. That sadness is the precursor to freeing our hearts often. So I actually love that expression, soul sadness. So thank you for highlighting it.
Yes, thank you, Maureen. Like Maureen accepted the invite, but it didn't quite make it to the screen. So sorry for having some tech issues there, Maureen, but thank you for that comment. Yeah, I really appreciate that as well. Kind of recognizing, like with rain, recognizing what's going on and not trying to just push it away. We have a wonderful question here from Bo, which I will read in just a moment. Let me go ahead and find Bo, if Bo wants to join us on the screen. This is a fun exercise, so thank you. Okay, so Bo has said, how do you balance listening to your heart and being responsible in the world? I would love to know more about following your heart as a way to guide your life while still being self-sufficient, such as paying bills. How do you follow the gold in our current society?
Hi, Tara. Thank you so much for taking my question, and thank you so much for your teachings.
Oh, it's lovely to see you, Bo.
You too.
Yes, So tell me a little more what brings the question up for you.
Well, on a personal level, I would love to accept this position teaching children, which is really where my heart is, and to bring some of your teachings into the classroom. But I have a dilemma because it's part-time and my heart is guiding me in that direction. But when I compare it to like full-time positions, it makes me think of the survival mind and how we all have to be very practical. And sometimes the world of people is very competitive, and that's the pragmatic side, but my heart is drawing me in a different direction, and I'm trying to live my life now in a way where I follow my heart and I listen to what my heart is telling me. So I was just wondering, how do you listen to that part of you and follow the gold while still making sure that you can survive in today's world?
Yeah, I think this is one of those questions that is so important and that so many of us are grappling with. So I'm delighted, Bo, that you asked it. And one of the things that helps me is to try to remove the separation between, what's pragmatic and what's spiritual, and know that meeting the conditions of the society and taking care of body or family or that kind of thing is part of us caring for ourselves. And that sometimes there's fear mixed in doing it, but there's also just a sense that it will actually enable us in general to be more relaxed and free if we have a certain stability. But at other times, there's a sense that I can do better without that stability. It feels really critical that I am in more of a creative zone. So that's one piece, is kind of don't make them so separate, because you also need to be able to listen to that intelligence that senses how it is in the world and does take good care. But what I'm hearing from you is that you have a leaning right now that you want to honor. And so this is what I figure is ultimately you can go either way. What matters is the quality of presence you bring to whatever path you take. So if you take the riskier path, then bring that presence that continues to find ways of soothing and comforting and finding balance in the midst of that. If you take the safer path, know that you're going to keep open to possibility when the time is right. But bring your heart and your presence either way, because ultimately you wake up because of the presence that you bring to the path, not because of the particular choice. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for everything, Tara.
Well, blessings, dear. I hope you enjoy whichever path you go on. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, so I'm thinking that this is probably that was probably our last one given the timing, and I'd like to just have a few minutes with you all to close in a way that feels where we can feel our togetherness and sense what we want to remember. So wherever you are, just to take a moment to again bring your attention inwardly. Just notice what it's like right now. Just feel whatever feelings are here, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant. You might sense if there's some wish or blessing you'd like to offer to yourself. Whatever resonates for this moment. What do you wish for yourself? And then widening your attention, sense all of those who have gathered. That it's so wild and strange that we can be in our own spaces and yet in a field together at the same time. And just feel your wishes, your good wishes extending outward. And you might imagine how the vision of us more and more, just a few degrees more even after today, dedicating to see the light of spirit in ourselves and each other. You might imagine a world where we really do recognize the intrinsic value of all beings, human and non-human, because we cause such suffering to non-human creatures that are sentient, valuable beings. And know that it all comes out of that basic capacity to be with our own hearts and trust what's here. I'll read you a poem that I found helpful. Julia Fehrenbacher writes, "Go gently today, don't hurry or think about the next thing. Walk with the quiet trees. Can you believe how brave they are, how kind? Model your life after theirs. Blow kisses at yourself in the mirror, especially when you think you've messed up. Forgive yourself for not meeting your unreasonable expectations. You are human. Praise fresh air, clean water, good dogs. Spin something from joy. Open a window, even if it's cold outside. Sit, close your eyes, breathe. Allow the river of it all to pulse through eyelashes, fingertips, bare toes. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe until you feel your bigness, until the sun rises in your veins. Breathe until you stop needing anything to be different. So we close together, feeling the shared heart space, and with the prayer that all beings everywhere might recognize and trust the gold, that basic goodness, and that we can live from this loving presence and create the world we believe in, a world that is just, a world that is compassionate, a world where all beings can awaken and experience their inner freedom. Thank you, friends. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you so much for hosting so beautifully. It was really lovely to be part of this, Corel.
Thank you so much, Tara. What a beautiful event. Really enjoyed every moment of it. And to all of our attendees today, we appreciate your generosity in being here. And to those of you who donated, we appreciate your monetary contributions. I also want to thank our wonderful co-sponsor, Insight Santa Cruz. If you haven't checked them out yet, I will put a link to their website. Really lovely. Kira has just asked about sharing that last poem. Maybe we could have the name of it and the author. If you want to send that to me, Tara, I can put it in the chat as well, or you can.
I will send it to you. And I want to just double that the Insight community is fantastic in Santa Cruz. I have friends and love them. So check it out.
Totally. Yeah, they're great. Especially Karen, who I think is here, was instrumental in making that happen. So thank you, Karen. Just one last reminder before we close today, that the event has been recorded. It's going to be limited just to folks who were here or who registered before we started today, and who are here with us today, just so that we can allow the specialness of the time together today to be kept in this container. I will be sending out a password which will be RAIN, RIAN, all caps, and you can use that to access the recording once we close up today. So I will send that out by email. Other than that, Tara, really hope to welcome you to Bookshop Santa Cruz in person in the future. And again, thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.